Hi, Logan. Welcome. We're so excited to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
So, basically, what we're going to do is start with you kind of providing a little background about yourself, starting with like education, how you decided what you wanted to do, how you achieved your current success, maybe any roadblocks or path changes you had along the way, and then going towards your career, what got you to your current career, and what a day to day in your life looks like. And then I'll go to specific student questions. So, over to you.
Cool. Sounds good. So let's see here. My education, do have a bachelor's degree in psychology from state, and I'm kind of in and out in progress with a master's degree in counseling from Point Loma Nazarene. And the experience that got me most into academic advising and now pre-professional health advising was being a peer advisor through the psychology department at state. So I transferred after 4 years from San Diego Mesa College to San Diego State as a psych major. And when I transferred, that transition I think was a little rough for me. The community college system was very different than the Cal State system as far as just the advising structure
Oh,
at
yeah.
community college. You would see one counselor who handled everything, and then San Diego State, you had a counselor for pretty much every part of your education. So that was definitely a big bump in the road that I had to kind of overcome. And I didn't seek advising immediately. After I transferred, I kind of transitioned by taking part-time classes because the financial aid was different too, and I filed a little late, so that was another bump in the road. But the good thing is that when I did go into advising, and I was really super stressed about my educational path, I had no idea what I was doing, taking up nutrition classes, and it was just all very overwhelming. And when I went to psych advising, I think my second semester at state, that was kind of a transformative experience as far as being able to sit down with a peer of mine and in 45 minutes have so many of my questions that have been stressing me out for half a year be answered like it was kind of nothing. And the good thing is I didn't lose really any progress at all, and that was kind of what I was nervous about, so I could still graduate on time for me. And just the feeling of relief I felt after that 45 minutes was something I knew that I wanted to perpetuate to other students. So then I became a peer advisor, became a peer advisor. Then I really loved it. And I think that as far as what do you attribute kind of the success to is I found something I enjoyed,
Oh, yeah.
not something I thought I should do. Because with psychology, I thought I should be just like like a mental health counselor of some sort, and I couldn't really see myself doing that. But for all intents and purposes, until that point, I thought I was going to be a mental health counselor. And so after that, when I became a peer advisor, then I became the teaching assistant that teaches for the class that teaches peer advisors in psychology. And then my passion only grew leading a team, doing something that I loved. And then after that, I was just sold on the profession. So I ended up going from that to kind of had a pause after I graduated, and because it takes time to takes time to find a job out there. So on average, I heard that it takes about a year to gain employment, and that was true for me. I applied everywhere and anywhere that would take a new advisor, and a lot of places asked for experience, and I think that's why it took a little bit of time. And that ended up landing me in the biology department, and I definitely kind of networked through the director of the psych department, who talked to the director of the biology department who needed an advisor. So networking was definitely something that was helpful for me. And through the biology department, I I advised a fair amount of students, and that was a really big learning curve because I was a single advisor for
Mhm.
1,600 students now instead of a part of a team of advisors. And at that point, I got to know some of my colleagues in advising within the College of Sciences too at State. And one of those colleagues was, her name was Gwen Hill, and she was the health professions advisor.
Awesome.
So many of my students were biology, and they were, since health professions, first thing you think of is usually biology. So many of my majors had kind of we shared so many of my majors between her and I.
Mhm.
And so I was kind of able to connect with her in a really meaningful way. And then I noticed that she did a lot more of the personal development, the kind of qualitative aspects of counseling, college counseling, that I didn't know was possible. I thought it was only academic advising, which is the more quantitative bit.
Mhm.
And she actually did a little bit of academic advising too, and I liked that balance. So I asked her, what it would take for me to kind of transition into a pre-professional advising role. And it was more that networking to kind of get my foot in the door. And she ended up kind of walking me through the ins and outs of pre-professional health advising. And then she ended up retiring. I applied for the position, and here I am as the director of the health professions advising office now.
Awesome. So cool. And one thing I know you didn't mention is part of, when you were or maybe my dog was barking during this time. So if you did mention it, I apologize.
Mhm.
But not only were you like a TA in the psych advising office, but you got an excellence award for all the work that you did. Like you completely revamped that office. And it's important for students to understand that, like, you know, you did some amazing things, which not only gave you the opportunity to network, but like you had people backing you.
That's true. Yeah, I kind of always I get nervous
Yeah.
talking about those things. But yeah, I mean, I did win an award at that point because of the restructuring of a lot of the advising practice that I was a part of. And that actually, in the biology department, the same thing happened. I won actually 2 awards in the bio department. Thank you. Uh, because again, the structure and the function of the office needed help. And it really was more, and this is a good takeaway, I guess, too, is it's more than just showing up, it's actually being invested. But again, if you follow that kind of passion, you find something you like, and it's easier to show up and be invested. Granted, you can definitely go above and beyond, which is kind of what I always tried to do.
Mhm. And
And
succeeded, I would argue.
nice. But yeah, so it's definitely that. I completely agree. The
Mhm.
going above and beyond and really showing up and showing what you're made of and giving it 110%, it really made a big, big difference in really fast tracking my career as an advisor.
Which is so awesome. And you definitely touched on many important kind of things there, especially like, it's easier to do all that like amazing work and go above and beyond when you enjoy what you're doing, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, you should always do it. And we don't always have the luxury of like, taking our time to figure out what that is that we were really passionate about. But the more you can do within any position, the better, off you are. Um,
Exactly.
and so before I get more into your career, and we'll probably end with like advice questions.
Sure.
Um, so you mentioned how like once you went to the advising office, that really sparked you know, your trajectory. But what interested you about psychology prior to that? Was that your major at Mesa? If not, what made you change to it?
Right. So I changed majors 7 times as an undergrad, mostly at community college because I don't know, everything was so expansive. I could study whatever I wanted. So I wanted to study everything, which is the most nerdy statement I could ever
I
say.
love
But
it.
anyway, there are so many things to be interested in. And I actually started out as a pre-med biology major, which is kind of ironic at this point. Um, so I started out as a pre-med biology major. I switched to a philosophy major. I was a history major there for like a few weeks. And then I realized bounced around at communications. Anyway, I bounced around and I wanted to do something pre-health again. And so I thought nursing would be a good avenue. And so I was a nursing major for a little bit. And through nursing, one of the nursing prerequisites was psychology 101. And so I said, sure, I got to take this anyway, so might as well. So I enrolled in Psych 101, and that class combined everything I liked about science and everything I didn't know that I liked about just human behavior and watching people and kind of being interested in that just kind of out in the world.
Mhm.
And it was just the merger of those two things and it just clicked. And so I changed majors one last time into psychology, and it really was the the bisection of like where science meets people,
Yeah.
which is just, and plus there was philosophy in that too, which I definitely loved because psychology is rooted in philosophy.
Mhm.
So it was just the perfect like trifecta of subjects for me, and it was, I never looked back at that point.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Um, and kind of like, I mean, not completely along the lines, but a lot of students had questions about how being a first generation kind of student impacted your academic career,
Mhm.
um, and what kind of unique difficulties kind of comes with this. And
Yeah. Oh man. But yeah, being first generation was a challenge. My parents, um, my mother's first generation American, and she she got an A in frisbee in high school, and that was the A. So she was not super into education, and my father always had to work like two or three jobs, so he just wasn't even able to. And so that posed a unique obstacle. My dad definitely wanted better for me, so he said, "Hey, just start community college. It's cheap," and he helped me pay for it and everything. But he kind of said, "Okay, like I know this is a good college, which was Mesa College. It's
Mhm.
close. You got bus routes and everything that goes to it. Just do some research." And so I just kind of took it a logical step of how do I even get admitted to college?
Yeah.
So I think that was the first time I realized, oh, like I'm different than other people that go to college that you think of, like, whose parents went to college and things like that, because I didn't know. I would discover things as time went, like, oh, you need a college ID card before, like I went to the bookstore to get my, once I actually like picked my classes, I went to the bookstore to get my books. And I was like, hey, I need to purchase books for these classes. And then they're like, oh, do you have an ID card to purchase these books? And I'm like, why would I need an ID card to purchase books? I have money, you have the books, right? And so it was just little things like that that I didn't know how to navigate. That definitely kind of delayed delayed some things, which is why I took longer at community college. So I had to learn the ropes a little bit. So
Mhm.
that was definitely a challenge, but it was interesting. At least it was that.
Absolutely. And do you feel that kind of like having that background and learning how to navigate things has been really helpful in your current position as an advisor?
Yeah, 100%. Because I can understand the perspective of both a student who came in with all the knowledge that I had gained because I had the knowledge now, and
Right.
they just kind of come in with their parents telling them that these things exist. And I could also understand the complete opposite of the spectrum of somebody who has no idea what financial aid even is,
Mhm.
or like how to get an ID card or where to go, those little basic things. So it definitely helped me be able to level with a lot of different students, um, in a really meaningful way.
That's awesome. And what about SDSU kind of, made you want to go from Mesa to SDSU?
Well, uh, I didn't have a lot of options. My family has, we've been in Point Loma for 120 years. So I
Wow.
didn't want to leave and because of that. And also, I couldn't really afford it. I was still taking the bus everywhere. Um, I know at that point, I think I had a car. Anyway, I digress. Didn't have any money. I had a part time job and was just dirt poor. So couldn't exactly move. My parents were still working. their fingers to the bone just to kind of get by. And I was starting to, at that point, help support them too. And so San Diego State just seemed like, hey, it's affordable to where if I do have to take out loans at some point, it's not going to be super, you know, super gnarly to do so and pay them back. Whereas like USD, UCSD would have been a little bit more less cost effective. But also CSU, I loved. I went to the campus once
Oh
and I
yeah.
just loved the feeling. It was beautiful. It felt like I took my mom there, and she was like, "It feels like Disneyland. Like it looks beautiful." I was like, "I know it does." So that's also kind of what sold me on SDSU too.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know if it was the same for you, but being we were also in Sci Beta together
Hmm.
for all the students, and that is basically a version of Sci Chi that's at community colleges. And one of our mentors really was big on SDSU,
Oh yeah.
and all the research involved and just all the great things that it had to offer. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that impacted you at all as well, but I was like, well, definitely going there.
Yeah, and it was one of those schools that you keep hearing about, as opposed to places like USD. You, I didn't hear too much about them, and
Yeah.
UCSD, of course, was like super well known, but that's for like medicine and research. And at that point, I knew I didn't really want to do research. So
Yes.
yeah, SDSU was definitely a solid choice.
Mhm. And kind of going along with that,
Sure.
well, more so going along with Psi Beta and your decision maybe not being so into research. You've been involved in so many different high impact practices, and are there any that had like the most impact on your kind of what is it largest impact on your life, and what are the benefits of really getting involved?
Right. So I would say the two organizations that I got involved with once I transferred, um, that had the biggest impacts. One was, of course, the psychology advising office, because that's my career. That's where I kind of discovered that. Um, and the other one was SciMore, which is the psychology mentoring outreach and education program. I still remember.
Nice.
And that program was great because I could mentor other students, but more so it was the going to community college to help students transition or understand that there are these resources that you can use before you transfer.
Hmm.
And I never thought I would like um, education as much as I did. I like the advising component, like connecting with
Hmm.
other people. But when I stood up in front of classrooms and was, speaking to students about resources and really trying to help with them, help educate them on all these things, that was definitely another super solidifying experience that helped me realize, okay, within the capacity of advising, I do like that connection, but I do like an education component as well. So that's why I like my current position, is because I actually teach a few classes on campus too, and they're kind of advising based courses. So as far as the importance of of getting involved, you can sit back and just kind of write out your education, but when you get involved, you're in a controlled space,
Yeah.
in a safe space that nothing gnarly is going to happen, but you're testing the very basic components of what you could do out in the field. So for instance, doing like a semester of undergraduate research, even if it's volunteer for credit, like granted, I knew I didn't want to do research because I took research methods at Mesa College and it was great, but not for me. But I uh, if you were to get involved in that, it's one semester, it's not a huge time commitment a week, but you get to test out not the whole career, but you get to test out, hey, do I want research as a component of what I want to do with psychology?
Hmm.
Same thing with the SciMore program I was in. Okay, do I want mentoring, some sort of mentoring and education as a component I want to do with psychology? So the importance of getting involved is really paramount, because your classes are going to teach you good things about subjects, but until you put them into a basic type of use, that's when you really start to understand and hone in on what you might want to do.
Absolutely. And were there any kind of classes you took that influenced kind of your trajectory as well? I know you mentioned Psych 101, you decided psych major, um, but were there any other classes that you were like, yes?
Um, yeah, yes, there were. Well, yes, there were. Of course, the psych advising was a class, so
Yeah.
that was definitely, that goes without saying. But the lower division courses, I think, like the pre-major courses, developmental psych, uh, was it physio
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 psych?
psych?
Yeah.
Yeah, physio psych. All those lower division courses helped me feel comfortable with the idea that this was right for me. So I was the type of person that wanted, because I changed so many times, I was trying to take very intro level courses to see if this was even a good fit.
Hmm.
And so I think every single pre-major class, except for biostats, um, I really did enjoy. And so those are transformative in the essence of, okay, Psych 101 definitely set that in motion, but all those lower division classes started to confirm that I liked components in each one of these courses.
Absolutely. That's awesome. And hopefully, you guys all watching this also have a similar experience. So, kind of again, sorry, going back to now high
Mhm.
impact practices and all the things that you were involved in, internships, working, et cetera. How did you manage to balance all that? And do you have any advice for, motivation and time management?
Yeah, that was that was a doozy. It really picked up kind of around when I transferred. So that was that was the interesting thing is, when I transferred, I did go part time because I had so many other components going on, plus the financial aid sadness for a semester. Anyway, as far as that's concerned, I wasn't afraid to make adjustments where I needed to, and that included with my education. I knew I was going to finish at some point. I wasn't tied to a timeline of like, I need to graduate by this time to go on to the next thing, to go on to the next thing, because there was just no point in that for me. I had already come so far and I was in a rush. And that just showed me, because I had to change majors so many times, that I was rushing too much.
Mhm.
So ultimately, uh, when I transferred, took that part time semester, I realized, okay, it allows me to work more, but maybe I'm working too much because, I miss school. So really kind of adjusting as I went. There were semesters where I was able to take four classes, and that kind of seemed to be my cap for me, which is only 12 units, which is still time, but other students take a lot more. And as far as the as far as the other things, work, I knew I had to, so I had no choice. And I knew I had to make a certain amount of money because I needed a certain income. So I worked with adjusting the things that I could adjust, and worked those around the things I couldn't adjust. And that's probably the biggest like bit of advice, is to try and look at it that way,
Mhm.
and just know that, continue the motivation. You'll know you'll finish your education. You'll know you'll hit a goal for sure, but you won't hit that goal if you try and just jam it all in there at once. So ultimately,
Absolutely.
it was really just kind of being fluid with those things and trying to manage my time in regard to how I felt, that ended up making me successful at the end of it.
Absolutely. Um, gosh, my eyes are just like watering for some reason. I apologize.
Now you're
I'm
crying
like
because I'm
cry. I
so
know,
good.
just yes, exactly. um, let's see. Where do I want to go now? So we've talked a lot about like networking
Mhm.
and being part of many organizations. How do you go about networking in these? Did you feel like your work kind of spoke for itself and made your advisors, mentors want to reach out to you, or was there some kind of combination of strategy on your part and interacting?
Yeah, I think there wasn't a strategy until I started looking for a job using advising. It really was the fact that every single person not every single person, most people that I came into contact with that were the heads of the organizations that I was in, the student orgs and everything else, they saw that I was putting in the extra effort. And
Mhm.
educators and people who work in education usually recognize that. And so when they see potential, that's what they want. They want the drive and they want to further that.
Mhm.
So I really think it was just working hard, showing how passionate I was, showing up and just giving it everything I had because I knew that this was right for me and I craved it. The people that ended up mentoring me and giving me letters of recommendation and offering to talk to this other faculty member on my behalf to get me involved in something else, they saw that I had a lot of drive, and they're educators, they just wanted to invest more in that potential. And so it was kind of something that you know sounds like super gloaty, but it kind of spoke for itself.
Yeah.
And that was really the way I kind of networked. It wasn't pre-formulated.
Right. And I mean, yeah, ultimately, even if you do formulate a way of networking, you still need to have that work that's speaking for itself that makes people want to, back you and put
Yeah,
attach their names to you, right? Um,
exactly.
of course, things look a little different now with the pandemic and everything. And you being an advisor, I'm going to kind of jump into some advice questions and then get back to your career.
Sure.
How do you suggest students kind of navigate networking, getting internships, especially during this time?
Yeah, the best thing to do is to let go of the things you can't control. And that's like the first bit of advice I give all my students. Because there are more limited options, some things have been put on a bit of a pause. So it's a balancing act. You have to kind of balance how much you want to have that specific thing that's on pause,
Hmm.
and versus getting involved in maybe something else or something different to explore that possibility that isn't on pause. So in order to kind of find opportunities, you have to, at this point in time, have an open mind. It's not going to be ideal when you're out there because, especially as like a psych major, the research on campus is limited,
Right.
and the research that you can find right now, this is just an example,
Mhm.
is like lit reviews and data entry, and that's kind of it. It's not you're a confederate in a study in a room and it's exciting because you're in it and you get to see other people. It's very much not that right now.
Yeah.
But if you really want to test research at some point, those are the bare bones of it. So if you're able to make that compromise and just get involved in that way, you're still able to kind of test your capacity for that.
Hmm.
Uh, but the even the if you have something that you think you kind of want to do, like working with people in a counseling profession or one-on-one, if you find ways like community service events through volunteer match or idealist.org or any one of those volunteer sites to work with each other virtually, there's tons of virtual opportunities. I know everybody's burned out over Zoom, but at this point, like, that's kind of what you can control, is you can control it by getting involved in that way. um, there's there's not an intense shortage where there's nothing accessible if you're willing to kind of compromise and do something virtual.
Absolutely. Um, and do you recommend, as far as, building letters of recommendation, getting your professional portfolio together, what can students do now on top of that? And you kind of touched on that with the internships, but now more so like with your professors or clubs or,
Right. And that's definitely going to be a little bit more difficult. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
yeah.
Professors and directors of volunteer programs you can see on campus, but in this environment you can't. So it's going to take a lot of proactiveness. If it's a professor, if you're able to be active in class, try to be active in class. If there are office hours, even if you don't need a whole lot of help, but you have a couple questions that could use clarifying, bring those questions forward during office hours, and don't be afraid to ask if you're really trying to like network with a specific professor because you like their career, you like their class, don't be afraid to ask for a 5 minute Zoom meeting just to
Mhm.
chat about your passion for whatever they're teaching, or just to touch base with them and level with them on kind of the human level. Like, we're all virtual, it's not ideal for all, and start there, and then start to build a relationship through that kind of means. And the biggest other thing as far as the networking thing goes is, kind of check in on them too, because we're all, having struggles and we're all having
Yeah,
victories through this whole thing. So I think that would be the best way to go about it.
absolutely. I completely agree with you. And thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
So this is kind of like a three-parter, so bear with me. I can repeat.
Nice.
I know, right? So first, and you again, you kind of touched on this, but did you consider other careers in psychology, and which ones? And kind of what inspired your decision to enter the health professions rather than like clinical psychology or therapeutic psychology? And then my final is, you mentioned you're kind of doing part-time graduate school, and what is that for, and what is your goal there?
Gotcha. So the boy, I was it called recency? Recency? I totally forgot the first thing you said. What was the first question?
No worries. Were there other careers in psychology that you considered? You had kind of mentioned earlier that like working directly with people in counseling may have not been for you, but like why?
Right. So um I considered almost all careers except for research. Like, I was thinking MFT, I was thinking, drugs and alcohol dependence, because I had that affinity for so many subjects in psychology. I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it. But the one thing I discovered, um, kind of doing more research on my own and really reflecting on who I was as a person, is I I there were a lot of populations, sounds super bad. There were a lot of populations of people I couldn't see myself working with, or even like having kind of a casual conversation with.
I don't think that sounds bad. I think it's really important for you to know that.
Yeah, and it's just like, it that's just it. I
Yeah.
I felt like, okay, I wouldn't be able to connect with people who had, drug and alcohol dependence, because I don't have a background of that. My family really doesn't have a background with that. So then I knew, okay, that's not it either. And then MFT, I was thinking of like a marriage counselor, but then, at that point I wasn't married yet. And also it was kind of like, uh, I don't know, that could get kind of dicey, and it's a little bit too like dramatic for me and intensive between a couple, and I don't know if it might feel awkward for me. So I was kind of like ruling it out based off of who I was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely consider multiple careers, but ultimately it was like specifically college student population I had no capacity for. I could advise back to back nonstop, and it was a blast to me for
Yeah.
whatever reason.
It is. It's really rewarding, like helping people find their passion, especially like once you found yours, being able to be like, you're gonna have this aha moment where like, and I can maybe help like get you there, not
Right.
necessarily choose for you, but help you find it, you know.
Exactly.
And it feels really good. I totally agree, and that's why I love teaching this class as well. Um, and so the second kind of part, because you answered the first two in that one, which
Yes.
is great, is so you mentioned that you're doing part-time master's program.
Right.
One, is it something you need to do to maintain your career, or is it something that's going to kind of change or shift your career from where it is?
Gotcha. So at that point, I was pursuing the master's degree while I was a undergraduate advisor for the biology department. And at that kind of conjunction, I thought, okay, this I've landed this job, and that job had, and every other advising job had advertised like either masters in education preferred
Mm-hmm.
or required. And
Right.
so the fact that I got just that position, I thought was like a miracle. So I was thinking my lucky stars. I was like, okay, I got to get a master's degree because now I'm capped off. Like that's kind of it. So I started going to my master's program very, very part time, kind of on and off because work was fluctuating with being busy and being slow. And then this kind of opportunity presented itself. I kind of networked my way into there. And the fact that I've gone this far is 100% on like non kind of gloating that I'm really good at what I do
Yep.
because it was the practical application 100% that got me here, not the education, because I'm
Right.
not I don't have an advanced degree yet in counseling and student development. It was just I learned by doing and
Hmm.
I paid attention. So now I am definitely like, this is as far as I could possibly go because they wanted somebody with a master's. People with PhDs were applying, people with medical doctorates were applying. And there were also applicants who had been advising health professions for 10 or 15 years that applied to this position. So I'm imagining the next step, which my goal is actually to be an assistant dean.
Wow, that's
And
awesome.
that next step, I I would, if I was a betting person, there's no assistant dean that just has a bachelor's degree. There's no way.
You could be the first one.
Yeah, not likely. So yeah, at this point, the master's is definitely necessary for me to kind of continue on into like that position or another position that is either equivalent to mine in a different college or
Mhm.
above it for sure.
That's so awesome. And I mean, just to continue to harp on this, like it really pays off to do excellent work, not good work, not the work you're expected to do, excellent work, um, system changing work, which you
Mhm.
have for sure done. Um, and yeah, he's always been an inspiration to me, you guys.
Oh, get out of
So
here.
let me fangirl a minute. So now where you are, what are some of your everyday roles? Like what's and you kind of touched on this, of course, but like what are your
Yeah,
favorite parts? What are the most difficult parts?
cool. Yeah, my everyday role, I wear like so many different hats in my current role. So I'm the director of the Health Professions Advising Office, but I am also a solo advisor again for an even larger student population. And I do have an office that I run, which consists of two student assistants and about 20, 21 peer mentors who also advise first year pre-health students. And so the the kind of main roles I have is I advise probably about 70% of my time,
Mhm.
just one-on-one advising and even some group advising. But my day-to-day is mostly just developing students into competitive applicants over time.
Right.
And then when it's time for them to apply, advising them on how to fill out their application, which sounds really boring when I'm saying it, but how to present themselves as a unique person. And so I get to know them a little bit more in depth in that way. And then the other, I would say 30%, just to make it easy, is kind of a mixture between offering workshops. I offer like 20 to 30 different types of workshops a semester.
Send them to me so we can share with my students.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
deal.
Cool.
So I offer workshops. I also teach a couple of classes. One's an advising class on being pre-med, and one's an advising class on being pre-vet. And we're adding PA here shortly.
Awesome.
And let's see, that. Oh, I also, of course, run the office. So um, even though we're virtual right now, it's still like having staff meetings, having peer mentor meetings, meetings within the College of Sciences to keep them aware of what we are doing as an office and integrate policies that the university changes into our practice. And then so those are all those things I love. Every
Right.
single thing, it's just it has a component of just working with the students that I like and doing one-on-one, doing educational, informational stuff, which I like through the classes. But the challenges is I am, because I'm solo advisor and spread very, very thin.
Right.
And with that comes a big, and I'm still learning, but it's a learning curve of maintaining my well-being in order to be there for other students. And the challenging part for me is to even the best thing for the student might not be for me to see them right then and there.
Hmm.
Because if I'm not in a good place, then I won't be in a good place for the other students that I'm seeing that hour, that day.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest challenge there. I think one other main challenge that we have is uh, the more so from the student perspective is the accessibility to the information.
Right.
So that's why I keep adding like classes, because standardized informational approach, getting the information out there and advice out there is important in that regard. But I meet with so many applicants who are like second and third years who just never knew our office existed, and they come in and it takes time to become competitive. So when they thought they could apply immediately, that's not always the case.
Right.
So I think that's the challenge that I'm trying to come up with innovative and creative ways to meet that challenge
Hmm.
and get as much information as accessible as possible while still maintaining the integrity of the information being put out there. So that's definitely another big challenge too.
For sure. Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
And so now, just because I know we're getting tight on time and as you mentioned, very busy. So I want to get into some advice questions.
Yeah.
And first, was there a piece of advice that you were given that like really still kind of stays with you today, or a piece of advice that you'd like everyone to have?
Ooh, that's a good one. Um, huh.
This one's are always a really difficult one.
Yeah, because there's it's hard. I mean, it's easy to go on like an advising tirade, but a specific statement. I think if you oh, here's a good one. If you don't if you don't know what you want to do, even remotely, that's okay.
Mhm.
Um, give it the time that it needs to kind of develop, and put yourself out there to try new things to help it along.
Mhm.
Ultimately, like advising in the psych department, advising the bio department, now advising pre-health students, I notice one common thing, and it's the pitfall of a lot of students that I have is um, everyone has a set plan of when they want to do things.
Yeah.
And it's like the next thing, and then I'm going to, get married, or I'm going to move in with my partner or whatever, and then I'm going to get a house, and it goes so far in advance. There is a component to life that is just be okay with kind of developing who you are now,
Mhm.
and you're in college to try new things and to take your time to figure it out a little bit. So if you are able to have that luxury, take your time, really test things out, get involved, and see what you like and what you don't like, because that's what college is for. College
Absolutely.
isn't just for taking classes.
Right. And life's not linear too. I mean, I try to stress that in every single one of my interviews. Like I have yet to have an interview with someone who's like, yep, this is what I did and this was always what I wanted to do and I did it. It's like,
Yeah.
no. I mean, that's all well and great if you do find that, like, good for you, but do not stress yourself over trying to maintain a timeline.
No.
Um,
No,
but yeah,
because once you graduate, the timeline doesn't exist anymore. The
right.
education system teaches us really well that things work on a timeline. They start that from kindergarten all the way through college. But life doesn't operate on any specific timeline ever. And so when you're out of that, it's either going to be a very, very harsh awakening,
Mhm.
or if you're in your education and you're kind of integrating that, then you will have smooth transition into the next phase of your life.
Absolutely. Um, and then, so this is a two-parter.
Mhm.
what advice would you give students who aren't sure if they would want to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist? And
Mm.
also, what about students who maybe don't want to go on to graduate school? Are there, you know, careers you recommend them looking into? That kind of stuff.
Gotcha. So, as far as the between a psychologist and a psychiatrist, now I can speak to both, which is crazy. The psychologist, I mean, you do have to earn master's degree, credential, things like that to practice licensure and things, and that may take a few years, right?
Mhm.
Around 3 years ish,
Yeah.
and then licensing exam. But a psychiatrist is different. Psychiatrist means med school.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that med school is comprised of 2 years of education. Once you're accepted,
Mhm.
which you have to get accepted into a medical program first. And it's not to freak anybody out, but it's rigorous. You have to be a strong student in the sciences and in the non-sciences, so strong student period. You have to really develop clinical and non-clinical community service experiences there. And then once you get in, it's 2 years of education, 2 years of clinical rounds. Then you get matched to a residency. And then it's 4 to 6 years, and your residency is psychiatry, but you're practicing all sorts of different
Mhm.
um, psychotherapy disciplines. So you won't just go into your specialty. Like clinical rounds will have you all over the place. It'll
Yeah,
have
you're
you
gonna
in.
have to do geriatric.
Yep.
You're gonna have to do surgery.
You'll have to do all of it. And so what I will say is, if if you're interested in psychiatry, just know you will be practicing medicine at some point, even if it's just in your clinical rounds, just in your education.
Mhm.
If you're practicing um, psychology, just to be a psychologist, you won't have that other component.
Right.
And so it really does depend on how you want to be educated and how you want to kind of interact with people too.
Very true. And yeah, I would say like definitely if you're interested in psychiatry, just you should be interested in all of medicine, and
Yes.
really excited because your last rotation or one of your brief rotations in med school will be psychiatry. So it's
Hmm.
not like that'll be your major within medical school. You're not
Right.
taking these core courses. You're doing like all the things.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that's awesome. And then the second part is kind of just in general, what do you recommend for students who aren't interested in pursuing graduate degrees? And are there real opportunities for individuals with bachelors like yourself?
Yeah. There are definitely opportunities. You do have to work pretty hard. It's going to be a little bit harder to secure a position, especially if they prefer a master's.
Mhm.
But there are opportunities out there. And first and foremost, like if you don't want to go for a master's, you don't have to.
Yeah.
The best piece of advice I was given there is that a bachelor's degree will open doors and it will close some others,
Mhm.
right? So, like now, if I listed a bachelor's degree and if I applied to a fast food restaurant, they probably wouldn't take me
Yeah.
because they would expect that, oh, he's going to want to be paid more.
Mhm.
So it closed doors like that, but it opened up other doors for positions like what I've had so far. Same thing with the master's degrees or a master's degree. It will open doors, but it will close some doors that you would be eligible for with just a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
So, um, what I would c- consider, I mean, if you just want to have a bachelor's degree and not do a master's degree, yes, there are positions out there. You could work in a research lab if you're into that. You could I'm sure there's different types of aides of some sort. I mean,
Yep. Educational aid,
yeah,
case manager, um,
yeah,
group facilitator.
there's definitely positions out there for folks with a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
And there's even room for growth in a lot of those positions too, if you work for like a company or a corporation or something like that. But the hold the phone, I just lost my train of thought. Of course, it's on like the tail end of this thing. Oh, the the thing with a bachelor's degree is ultimately graduate school will always be there.
Mhm.
So if you don't want to go right after, you don't have to. I didn't. I never planned on going to graduate school. I didn't think I was even going to graduate college. But when I did, I just wanted to work. That was me.
Mhm.
So I did that for a few years and then realized, okay, yeah, I want to get a master's because I want to keep growing. And, there are opportunities that are above me that I could kind of see myself doing. So yes, there's positions out there with a BA. No, you don't have to go to a graduate school, but if you do end up wanting to go, you it's a
Yeah.
lifetime's a long time to be educated. So
Yeah.
you can go at any time.
Absolutely. And I think that that's really important advice. It really is never too late to decide,
Uh-uh.
career change, or major change or what have you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like, I always felt very self-conscious because, when we were in psych advising, I was hearing of people I was kind of an older student, a couple years older. And I heard of people going to really like got accepted to a PhD program or a master's program or a counseling program. And I hadn't even applied I was not graduate school bound. So, and I was a couple years older than the average student who was my peer.
mhm,
So when I graduated college at 26, not having any prospects for a graduate degree, and now that I'm 30 and I'm like halfway through my master's degree, I've realized that time's irrelevant. I'm still getting the
yeah,
education. I'm still happy with what I'm doing,
yep,
and I have prospects. So it outside once you graduate, it's just a different world out there.
yeah, yeah. And social comparison will get you every time. Like, really,
Yep.
just, I know it's human nature, but really try not to do it. It's
Yeah.
just, no one's path is the best path for you. Your
Yep.
path is the best path for you, as cheesy
Exactly.
as that might sound.
That's
Um,
true.
And I know that we're getting, really short on time, but is there anything else you'd like to kind of leave students with? And I know they can probably find your email via the San Diego State website, but
Yeah.
can I share it with them if they want?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. My email's lwatson@sdsu.edu. And granted, I have umpteenth amount of students that I have to see, but if you're curious and you feel like, hey, like anything that I've said is kind of matching some thoughts that you had or some hesitations, the fun part about what I do again is I love connecting with students and giving advice. And so just please feel free to touch base with me about any of it, even if you're feeling kind of stressed or whatever. Granted, I'm not a mental health counselor or anything, so I can't go beyond that. But I think the parting kind of piece of advice um, would be once eventually things will start to open up. They already are,
Mhm.
right, with pandemic. So I would definitely try not to use the pandemic as too much of an excuse to not put yourself out there and find some opportunities and be consistent about trying.
Yeah.
So every month, like jot it down in your calendar. Okay, I'm going to contact these several agencies and see if they're accepting students as volunteers or students as interns or something like that. And the other piece of advice too is if you feel like you would want to go into counseling or want to go into a specific field like school psychology or anything like that, set up a Zoom interview with those folks and just
Hmm.
touch base with them 15 minutes. People love talking about themselves.
Yes, I do.
So, you know, pick their brains, see how they got to where they are, what they like, what they don't like, and that way you get a little bit of an informed perspective.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I mean, really, don't be afraid. Don't tell yourself that, you know, well, I'm not worth their time, blah, blah, blah. No, especially you're in a great collaborative field where people want to help and
Mhm.
inspire the next generation. So um, definitely utilize that.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, awesome, Logan. I really appreciate it. I know students will too. And it was really good catching up. As
Yeah.
briefly as it was. And yeah, I really appreciate it.
Cool. No
And
worries.
I will talk to you
Awesome. Thanks for
soon.
having me.
Yeah.